Welcome to Dark Cat Studios. My name is Azel Zor, and today we are painting the Heldenhammer, captained by Jago Roth. I learned from the last ship not to worry about the details to the end, so now I'm just laying on the red paint all over the sail. I'm going to get this sail color established before I ever start any of the details. It's really important when starting the miniatures is what is your process? How are you going to go about tackling this model? What order are you going to paint things? Typically sit with the model for a bit and pick out all my paints and get them ready. I put down a black here over the detail because I'm testing if when I apply this yellow, do I need to go back and black out all the detail before I apply the yellow? And when I apply the yellow over the red, I'm just seeing the value difference between the colors. And you will be able to see the difference, and this is why you can tell like the acrylic paints have a translucent quality to them, and this is why I layer on different values, the base coat to different highlights, and work my way up because it matters what paint is underneath. I mean, the difference is slight. It's just, you can see it's darker and you can see the black coming through, but the black does give it a little outline. So there's the advantage of painting on the black, is all this detail will be outlined. But I realized I could use a wash. I could darken the edges and get that same effect. I'm applying a couple coats of shade there around the edges and details of the model. What stands out. The brush I'm using I'm painting white on black, which is always fairly tricky, and I think the brush I'm using at this point is actually too big for the details that I'm painting, and I have a hard time just hitting those little spots. But I think I can show you a really good example of how you don't worry. We just go back and grab some black paint, clean up our mistakes. I'm sticking with just the sails until they're done before I move on to other objects, and I'm applying a lighter yellow over top of this darker yellow. It is lighter than the shadowed yellow or darker color. I have a tendency to just sort of build up the values from a darker base coat and then try to get lighter and lighter. But I'm going over and I'm putting a lighter edge highlight on top as well. Can run the side of the brush along the top. Because they're elevated, you don't actually have to paint each little detail. Just by keeping the brush elevated over those raised portions, you can paint them without painting the color underneath. You can see on the sail I've got some darker discoloration and patches, and that's what happens when you essentially leave the ink wash pooling in areas, or when you try to pick it up afterwards. You'll create those changes, but I like the effect that the wash is added. In the pictures for this model seemed to me more of like a ketchup and mustard color, like the yellow was fairly bright and the red's quite bright, and I did want to darken it up, and I want to make these sails look darker, so I was happy with how that turned out. There's the sails. And just those edges, I'm just taking a bit of red and cleaning up any little spots and mistakes. I was not focused or planned on how I would paint certain parts, so I would jump around between the ship and the sail. There's all these tiny little triangles that make up the hull around all the little tiny cannon windows. So you have cannon windows, and you've got little red hull triangles, and then you've got the cannons, and then the ship itself has kind of castles on it and rooftops, and the sails itself is its own other project. But I was jumping around between these things and making a mess of paint. It was not a systematic process. I try to record good shots of one side of painting it, so I'm not just showing you, I'm painting a hull and then I paint the other hull and show you that as well. I don't need, it's really the same thing, just the other direction. While I'm recording those parts, sometimes I paint half the ship like that and get some of the recording done, and then I gotta go back over through those paints to paint the other side. So I think it was a little bit of combination of learning on how I'm recording. With the Heldenhammer, I definitely did not attack it systematically, and that took a lot more time. I have seen people paint one object at a time, like paint a face and then paint the next part of the body, some of the high-end painters. For the most part, my process has been painting on base coats, and it could take a couple coats trying to getting the paint on, throwing on some washes, bringing up all those shadows, and then from there, bringing up the colors and the highlights afterwards. Plan out what you're going to do before you do it. Have an intention, and have a bit of a system. And when you look at the back, this bronze, you can see the difference between bronze over the black and bronze over or gray. Captain Yago Roth, son of the famous map-right Indigo Roth, spent his life adventuring across the seas of the world. After decades of piracy and the countless deaths of crewmates and comrades, he decided to return home to the child and wife he had left behind. Unfortunately, Sortosa and his life was in flames, and he was too late to save his home or family. Yago Roth would eventually seek and acquire the Heldenhammer, in which to seek his revenge upon Count Noctilus and the Dreadfleet. The Heldenhammer is the personal flagship of the Grand Theogonist, and a true monster of a warship, equipped with 180 guns. At the front of the ship sits Sigmar's Wrath, a great statue held in place by great chains, each length the length of an ogre. The statue can be released and hammer down upon enemy vessels. Great steam pistons help to raise it up and prepare to strike down again upon Count Noctilus and his allies. Quick tip on your brush, you can just spin it here on your palette, or I'm showing you on my glove to make sure I have a nice tip. I enjoy using washes. I always use washes. It's just such a easy way to get nice shadows in between the details. It really makes everything stand out. Yeah, now I'm just throwing on the highlights. And this is where I need to practice and work a little bit on where exactly to highlight. And I've only recently learned about zenithal base coating, where you have like a whiter spray on the top and a darker spray on the bottom. So I'm excited when I get back to figure miniatures using that zenithal spray idea. This is where I'm going back over the details again, except I'm using like a lighter gold. Ideally, you can still see the darker bronze underneath, and then the gold kind of adds depth and highlight to the color. You can see it here on these flat surfaces where the raised portion sticks up, and then in the background it's darker than the foreground. Here I am painting 1,000 cannons. And when you're painting a lot of different details, a lot of different colors, it was a lot of work. And this ship was probably the hardest ship to feel like painting. I was getting really sick of painting it compared to the other ships. It took me the longest. Yeah, it had a lot of repetitive details. And there we have it, the Heldenhammer of Yago Roth. He actually stole this ship. It's not his. In true pirate fashion. Yeah, the twin-tailed comet of Sigmar. The huge clockwork figure on the front is designed to smash down on the enemy's vessel and sink it. When you play the game in the first mission, you use this ship, and the Count Noctilus's ship. They're the last 2 ships that I painted for the game. They're basically the main 2 ships you start with, and 2 captains. I was a little worried that if I painted them first, I wouldn't want to paint the rest and just start playing the game. But they are like the biggest, most impressive ships, so I want to put my best technique into it, and I started off on the smaller ships. Thank you. I appreciate you watching this video and taking the time out of your day. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully some of my tips help you in your painting. And just remember, it's easy to fix mistakes, not to stress out, have fun, and it's a fun learning process.